So what are your earliest memories?
Well, the earliest were when we lived at 448 18th Street in San Pedro
Mm-hmm.
before I went to school. And it was down in the southwest part of San Pedro where many of the Italian, Slavonian, and Sicilian fishermen lived, and they would spread their nets on the street
Really, right on the
to
street.
vend them. And they made wine in their garages because it was still prohibition. So this was time of the Depression, time of prohibition.
Yeah.
And one of our daily amusements was going down to the Union Ice Company, which was down a block from us, to the loading dock, and the iceman would cut the ice in 25-pound bricks to put in your ice box.
Yeah.
And they'd leave long slivers of ice. So we'd gather all the long slivers of ice to suck on.
There you go.
And you had a little card, a little square card that said 25, 50, 75, 100. And whatever number was up, that meant how many pounds of ice they were to deliver that day.
To your house.
Yeah, to the house. And I had my dog, Lucky Lindy, there, that was named after Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic. And to me, he was a big dog, but of course I was rather small. He was a terrier. I think he was probably a bull terrier.
Okay.
And he was very protective of me. If my mother would go to spank me for doing something, he would gently take her hand in his mouth, you know.
That's a loyal pet.
Seriously.
And I remember this one time, my birthday was probably my third birthday, third or fourth at the most. When kids brought you a gift, they would also give you a kiss.
Mm-hmm.
This little boy went to give me a kiss, and he went for his throat. And this friend of the family, Nick Capelli, I was playing on the front porch, and he went to pick me up to bring me into the house, and the dog chased him all the way downtown, wouldn't let him stop. But the funny thing is, after we lived in a duplex, and the landlord lived on the other side, and he had a son that was a young teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the son was out smoking in the garage, and a parent came out and he threw his cigarette over the partition in the garage to our side where it caught fire.
Oh.
And Dad had probably homebrew in there, and he had shells in there. And a neighbor called my mom and said, "Dolly, do you know your garage is on fire?" And my mom said, "No, did you call the fire department?" She said, "No." So Mom called the fire department. Well, they came out, of course, and my overalls got caught on the fence, and he wouldn't let the firemen come free me.
Oh.
From the fence.
Oh.
So not too long after that, my folks told me that Lucky Lindy ran off.
Oh.
But I think they had to send him to another home.
Yes.
But he was a good friend. So I can't remember too much what we did playing there. We played outside. My neighbor had a little organ in her house, so we'd go play on that organ.
Mm-hmm.
And annoy that mother. And I think they fed me garbage. I'm not sure, but but we had a good time. I started kindergarten there, went about 2 months, and then we moved up to 1048 West 12th Street. And then I got sick, and it was December. And I'd be fine when I woke up in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I would run a fever, and I'd just collapse. And my mom took me to Dr. Norman, and he couldn't tell what was wrong with me, so he said he wanted to put me in the hospital for a series of tests to determine what was wrong with me, because this was going on. And my dad asked if they could wait till the day after Christmas. So the day after Christmas, I went in the hospital, and I had paratyphoid fever. And I was the only case in the San Pedro, Wilmington, Long Beach area. There was no other reported cases. So that's why I said I think the kids fed me garbage.
Oh.
They just had no other reported cases. So we were quarantined for a month then. And my mother took care of me. And I really lost a lot of weight. My knees were the widest part of my legs. My elbows were the widest part of my arms. But I recovered well from that.
You were what, 5 at this time?
Yes. Can you be 5 to go to kindergarten?
Yeah, that's when.
Okay. I don't know how strict they were then.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 5. I was probably 5 that October.
Yeah.
So, and so at Cabrillo Avenue School, I had lots of friends, and a lot of those friends was at this last reunion I was at this year. And we had such a good time at school. You know, we liked our teachers. We loved Mr. Valentine, our janitor, and we had good games on the schoolyard. And I know this one time we were playing baseball, and the girls and boys played together.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, because when I got to junior high, the girls and boys had separate yards.
Separate players.
For lunch,
yeah.
for sports activities, for everything, you had separate
Really?
yards.
Wow.
For lunch? Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And so anyway, I was third base, and Lorenzo runs around. I didn't want him to make home, and I grabbed him by the suspenders and hung on for dear life as he dragged me down the way. And then it was sometime later, and I don't think it was on purpose. I was playing catcher, and Lorenzo let go of the bat, and it hit me right in the forehead and knocked me out.
Oh.
But I don't think it was on purpose, you know. I don't think it was retaliation. It was just an accident. So then the police car took me home that day.
I'm sure that just thrilled your mother.
Yeah. And Betty Jean Cruz and I were safeties, which meant we checked your permits to go home to school, to lunch for,
Okay.
to home for lunch. And so we thought we were really the police, you know.
Yes.
So after we let everyone go home for lunch, we didn't have school permits, but we'd go down to the Hobby Nobby and buy 5 Hobby Nobbies, which were little hamburgers, you know, to eat. And that was the highlight of our school day. I was put in corrective gym there. And when the doctor, and I wasn't quite sure why, and when the doctor came around, he asked the school nurse why I was in corrective gym, and she says, well, it's her feet. And he says, well, I can't see anything wrong with them except they're long and skinny. So I got out of that. But I took a triple A with a quadruple A heel.
Wow.
You know, so that was the reason. So
that's where I got those, because I used to have.
Yeah, that ended that. And just while I was in junior high too, we had the earthquake in '32.
The 30, yeah, 30.
And when it occurred, it was around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was playing, my music teacher was over. I was in the Porter School of Related Arts for classical piano lessons for 6 years.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah, and anyway, she was at the house when I was having a lesson, and all the pictures came off the piano. My mother was in the kitchen, the dishes came out of the cupboards, you know, and she let out a scream, and she came around the corner and grabbed me, and we all ran outside. And my dad was getting in the car to come home, and he said he thought someone was jumping up and down on the rear bumper.
Yeah.
And he got out, and there was nobody there, and the cornices were coming down from the buildings downtown and everything. Well, he never did come home. He phoned, and he phoned my mom, and she wasn't gonna go inside to answer the phone, but eventually she did. And he says, now, don't worry, Dolly, it's all over. Just about that time there was an aftershock, and she said, the hell there is. And she hung up and she ran out, she jumped over the hedge to where I was. And we slept outside, and my dad didn't come home for 3 days. They were retrieving bodies
Yeah,
in Long
there was
Beach
quite a death toll from the quake.
and looking out for looting.
Yeah.
The big damage was the buildings down there, and my teacher was killed. She ran out of a shop in Long Beach, and a cornice fell on her and killed her. And our school was damaged. It was brick. So we had to go to school in tents, and the bottom was wood up to about this high, and then it was screen, and canvas top was canvas that could be let down.
Yeah.
Well, I put my finger in a knothole, and I couldn't get it out. And I just sat there, and then Mr. Axtell excused the class for lunch, and I was still sitting there. So he came out, and he got my finger out. But I was embarrassed by that. So they had the new, it wasn't a new school, they just, I don't know what, they replaced the brick with concrete. I don't know how they did it, because I wasn't paying close attention, but it was the same shape as before, and it was in the same site, so they did something to it.
Yeah.
If they concrete over it or what.
Yeah, it says the earthquake was March 10th, 1933
Uh-huh.
at 6, or at 5:55 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
120 people killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was, I think that was the year they were building our hospital. No, it was, they built our hospital after that, because it was earthquake proof when they built it.
Mm-hmm.
But this was around the same time too as the longshoremen strikes were going on, and the shipyard strikes. And there was just lots of animosity over this. And the police were sort of in the middle of it, because they had to see that the scab workers, which is what they call people who cross the line to go to work, and people did, because they'd just been through a depression.
Yep. Well, the depression was still going on.
So the union men would beat them, you know, with sticks or brooms or whatever, broom handlers or whatever they had. And there was a lot of hate for the police, because they were helping people get through to go to work. And there was a confrontation between a policeman, friend of my dad's, and a longshoreman, and the longshoreman took a banana hook. Do you know what a banana hook is? It has a lateral handle like this and a big hook like that. He went after the policeman with the banana hook, and the policeman shot and killed him. So that stirred things up even more, and the next day they had put a dead rat on the sidewalk in front of the police station, you know, and they said what his name was, killed by a rat, you know. And he had to stand trial on that, and he was exonerated.
Yeah.
But the hard feelings still went on. When I came back and worked there as a nurse in the 50s in San Pedro Community Hospital, there are people that still hated my dad because of that strike. But when I was going to school, I had a lot. There were a lot of kids whose fathers worked as longshoremen, you know, and they'd mainly they'd say, "Think you're smart because your dad's a cop." But then Louis Miller would sometimes chase me home, and I'd try to avoid him by going up alleys if I could. And this one time he had caught me on the lawn of this lady's house, and he was beating me over the head with a notebook, and she came out and made him stop. And then one time he caught me going up the alley, and he was beating me across the back with a board. And I never told my folks. And so I was going home and changing into my coveralls, because that was my traditional play clothes. And my mom walked in and saw my back was black and blue, and she said, "How did you get that?" And I said, "Well, Louis Miller did that." And she says, "Wait here till your father comes home." So my dad came home, and he looked at my back, and he says, "Get in the car." You know, not another word. So we drive over to Louis Miller's house. His mother was a florist and had a florist place in her front. And there was about a dozen steps going up to it. And he said, he knocked on the door and he says, "Alma, I'm taking Louis down to juvenile hall for beating my daughter." And as it was, the boys were afraid of my dad in normal circumstances. He came out, and poor Louis, I don't think he touched the step going down. My dad had him by the back of the collar. Never said a word to him. Put him in the back seat, took him down, and John Duffy was the juvenile officer there. So we go up, and John starts talking to him, and Louis starts crying, and I'm so embarrassed because I hate to be there and see Louis cry in front of me. So we got out, and Louis never spoke to me again, but he never hit me anymore.
I'll bet.
But that was, I felt sorry for Louis, and he went on and graduated and ended up being a lawyer. When things were passed, I haven't seen him for a number of years.
He ended up being a lawyer?
Hmm?
He ended up being a lawyer?
Yeah. But that really went on. The animosity was there for just many, many years, you know. And when I went to junior high, Vivian Taylor, she was the black girl in my class, and she was taller than I was and a little stockier than I was. And she was always saying, "Think you're smart because your dad's a cop," you know, and then other comments. Well, this one, and we wore middies and skirts in junior high. We wore uniforms, we had starboard watches, pilots were the safety officers, you know, it was run like a ship. It was Richard Henry Dana Junior High School, which is why it was run like a ship. And this one time, going up the stairs, I turned around and I brought my notebook down on the top of the head, and I said, "I don't want you ever to say that to me again." And I thought, well, I'm really going to get it now because the safety's going to turn me in. And but nothing ever came of it, and she stopped, and she graduated from high school with me. Yeah. So that ended. So in high school, I didn't hear any of that. If whatever they felt, they didn't say it.
Yeah.
Junior high was about the last time of that. So, and in grammar school, I had a teacher, I was a teacher's pet, and I never exactly knew why. It was Mrs. Griffith, and she wrote a poem. We had autograph books, and we'd have kids sign them and teachers sign them and everything, you know, and you'd write things when the golden sun is setting, and your mind from care is free. What of others you are thinking, will you sometimes think of me? You know, very sentimental things like that. Or roses are red, violets are blue. You know, all kinds of things I'd write in them. But that was a common thing. She wrote a poem in it, and it was lovely child playing in a lovely gown. She looks at everyone and straight into the eyes of wind and rain. She may be sad when the rain comes. She may be glad when it goes, but always she has a smile to give the world.
Oh, what a sweet,
I
sweet
thought that
poem.
was very sweet. But I never knew why she liked me. And maybe she wrote that in everybody's autograph, but who knows. And junior high we felt really big time wearing the middies and skirts and a uniform until after the first year was over, and then we were rather tired of it. But I think they did that mainly because girls were so self-conscious of what clothes they had and didn't have, that if you all had to dress the same, you didn't feel shabby if you had poorer clothes.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a good thing. And Met a lot of friends. This is the first time we met friends from the rest of the schools in San Pedro because Richard Henry Dayton was the only junior high school in town. So that's when I met all my friends from Point Foreman, and when I met Conchi Mashida,
Yep.
and he became my best friends, and
Yep.
kids from all over. The same, the high school was the one high school in town for all the schools,
Yeah.
so we really got to know a lot of different people. And we had a very active girls' athletic club, and that was really good. And I had one of my favorite teachers that I named Suzanne after was Susanna Boucher. She is my typing teacher and my homeroom teacher that I liked so much. And I think they were all good experiences we had there. But we were really, the boys and girls' play yards were segregated by sex.
In junior high.
In junior high, yeah. It wasn't that way in grammar school, it wasn't that way in high school.
Just those crazy adolescent,
Just those crazy
early
adolescent-
adolescent years.
Well,
Probably
you know-
not a bad idea.
Yeah,
all things considered.
really.
That's,
Well, you know, you have kids there, some that are so young and then some
Yeah.
that look so,
oh,
Adult.
Yes.
you know. There was, one boy in grammar school, James Bone, he was the first boy to take me to a movie. He and his dog would come pick me up, and we'd walk to the theater, and his dog would wait outside, and it was a matinee.
Yeah.
And then after we'd go to the Wheaton's for malt, and the dog would wait outside, and then he and his dog would walk me home. Well, one day how this romance ended, I passed around this picture of a Neanderthal man that I had marked James Bone on.
Oh.
I passed him in the class. And his retaliation is, I got out of school one day and he shot me in the butt with a BB gun. Well, he lived across the street from the school, so he could go home and get it fast.
Yes.
So that was the end of that romance.
Oh.
But junior high, we had fun. We went to Betty Elroy's for dancing classes for boys and girls, and it was all the jive classes then.
Mhm.
So that really was a good orientation to dance. And when I went to junior high, the one piece my mother wanted me to play was Chopin's Polonaise Militaire, and I played that, and then I never touched the piano again. I said, I don't have time for piano lessons.
Wow.
Had no idea you took 6 years of piano.
Yeah. So I didn't. And then in junior high, I don't think we were playing football in the streets then. I think that was in high school. It may have started in the 9th grade that I got, no, because it wasn't until Pat, when I started high school, Pat Gadden, her dad, Jerry, was on the LAPD too, and he was transferred down to San Pedro for some misbehavior, because San Pedro was where they transferred people who misbehaved because it was such a tough port town. My dad got transferred down there from Hollywood, and this is when I was still, it was before I started school, because for some reason he was a patrolman in the Hollywood area, and they weren't picking up our garbage. And he'd called a couple times, and they still didn't pick up our garbage. So he took the garbage and dumped it on somebody's beautiful Hollywood lawn. And he ended up being transferred to San Pedro. The one thing that the police did do during the Depression, and the Depression lasted, it still affected when we lived on 12th Street. They took a voluntary 10% reduction in pay so they wouldn't have to fire as many policemen. And by taking it voluntarily, it wasn't written into the city charter and made
Yeah.
permanent. But they were trying to keep people from being fired.
Yeah.
And what I remember on 12th Street was that men would come to the door for work, and my mother said, well, I don't have any work for you to do, because we had the landlord paid for a Japanese gardener to take care of our yard. She said, if you come around and sit on the back porch, I'll fix you lunch. So there was always some man sitting on the back porch
Eating lunch.
having lunch. But times are hard for a lot of
Yeah.
our friends.
Yep.
And I know we had to take up a collection for a Christmas dinner for our minister. You know, it was really bleak.
Yeah.
But it never really affected me. And the funny thing was, to get people to go to the movies, they'd have what they call bag night. And they'd give away something, maybe a toaster or coffee pot or something like that. And sometimes it would be $10 cash, or a really high $25 cash was really a big amount, because at that time,
that was a lot of money back then.
yeah, my dad was making $200 a month. It was
Yeah.
a good salary. And my mom won a clock that I still have.
Is that
on
the
bag
glass
night.
domed one?
No, no, it's in the boys' room on the top shelf. It was black one that I had in the kitchen.
Okay, yeah,
Wood
yep,
stove.
yep.
I still got that.
Yep.
That was a bag night clock. And it's really a good clock.
Did they
But it
just
got
do
very greasy.
lottery with the ticket stubs, or what would they have they do?
Yeah, your ticket stub was the number.
Yeah.
And they'd just take their end of the stub and,
Yeah.
and
They do it.
draw it. But they had a hard time getting people to go to the movies when they didn't have money. And
Well, yeah.
movies weren't that expensive. But, so I don't think there was too much, except a lot of good friends, and it was really a good mingling to have Betty Elroy teach us these, you know, they'd teach us the Lambeth Walk, it was popular, and the Camel Hop, a lot of very different steps.
Steps, yeah.
And it got the girls and boys dancing together, so the boys didn't stand against the wall and the
Yeah.
girls stand against the other wall. And then I went to high school at San Pedro High School, and I started to tell you about Jerry Gadding getting transferred down to San Pedro, and that's when I met Pat and Jerry. And Pat became my best friend, was my best friend for life. And
What was Pat's maiden name?
Gannon,
Mhm.
Patricia Marie Cecilia Gannon,
Okay.
yeah. And in high school, I knew I wanted to be a nurse, because I never ever wanted to be anything but a nurse. I originally wanted to be a missionary nurse, then I wanted to be Jane Stewardess of the airline, you know, because you had to be an RN to be a stewardess when that first came out. That was a requirement.
Wow.
And then I wanted to be a Navy nurse. And this is where Conchi and I got into it. And we had Latin together for 4 years, among other classes. But in Latin, we had more time to write notes. And I tell him why my ship in the U.S. Navy was going to beat up his ship in the Japanese Navy, you know. And we got out Jane's Book of Fighting Ships,
Yep.
used that as our reference, you know, as to why they were, you know, these long, detailed letters, what we were going to do to each other. Well, we did that for 4 years, up until Pearl Harbor broke
Yeah.
out.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
But that was so funny, you know.
wow.
But that was the one continuous argument that Conchi and I had, and we'd play tennis together frequently, and we were boys and girls sports editor of the junior high paper together. But it was so funny, and the thing was, he was so tiny. He was maybe never in his life was he over 5'2", and I think never in his life was he over 115 pounds. You know, really tiny. And I always intimidated him because I was bigger. But anyway, our friendship continued in high school. We did the same thing, and we had the same friends. The kids at Point Furman were all good friends of ours, and Pat lived out right across on Pacific Boulevard, right by the turnoff down to Cabrillo Beach. So every morning in the summer, I'd get my work done at home, and I could usually get it done by 8 o'clock because I'd get up early to get it done. Then I'd go catch the bus and go out to Pat's house, get up, and she'd be waiting, and I had to help her with her housework before she could go to the beach. And then we'd walk down, and then I'd try to remember to save a nickel for the bus ride home. But then I'd decide to get an ice cream bar with it instead, and I'd have to walk home from the beach. If I was a minute late after 5, my dad was going to put me in a convent. I heard that all my life. Put me in a convent, put me in a convent. And most of the time I was pretty good, but I know my senior year I spent half my summer on restriction where I couldn't go to the beach at all because I wasn't home on time. It was pathetic. Anyway, it was fun too. And we had a group of 8 friends called Octosorores. And it was Pat and Shirley Hayes and Jean Snee-Weiss and Virginia Magellan and Martha Kames and Grace Jenkins and Merrill Ashland and me. And we'd go to movies together, and we'd go to ball games together, and we'd go out to dinner together, and we really stayed close friends the whole 3 years of high school. Or we'd just get together at another house. And so we stayed friends all those years. We really got separated when we left high school because everybody went in different directions. But Pat and I always stayed best of friends.
Yep.
And the funny thing, a lot of boys that were our friends, both boyfriends of the 8 of us in high school and friends that we played football with out at Point Furman, you had a lot of boys as good friends, and we called each other cousin. We always say, "Hello, cousin," because it signified that you weren't a boyfriend, but you were a good friend. Yeah. And some of my cousins were on the track team, so lots of times after GAA, I'd run laps with them, and but we had just a lot of good friends and a lot of good times in high school. And I don't remember anybody's feelings being hurt, or I think the worst time was when Pearl Harbor happened, because Terminal Island was where all the Japanese students lived. Well, most of them. William and Naka lived the next block down from me, but there weren't a lot of Japanese up in that area. Most of them their fathers were tuna fishermen with purse seiners that were out to sea for long periods of time, so they lived on Terminal Island. Anyway, about a fourth of our class were Japanese.
Really? That much? I didn't realize it was...
And they came to school that Monday so downcast and didn't know what to say or what to do. It looked like they were embarrassed. And most of the kids felt sorry for them because they know they didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah. But a lot of kids were very nasty to them too, which are kids that would be nasty to anybody, I guess. And Conchi's father had a purse seiner, which is really a big tuna boat that would go way out to sea and down to South America to catch fish. He was down off San Diego when he heard it over his boat radio, so he turned around and came back to San Pedro and was arrested as a spy because he had a radio on his boat. So he was sent to prison. And then by February they were given the notice that they had 48 hours to get ready to leave, and they could only take what they could carry in a suitcase. And he went to a camp, Conchi and his mother, and his brother and sister were sent to a camp in Arizona. And so I didn't hear from him during that period. And then when I graduated in June, what was funny, the two hospitals that I was interested in going to, one was the Hospital for Women and Children in San Francisco. The only reason I really wanted to go there, because I liked the nightlife in San Francisco. There wasn't a valid reason for me wanting to go there. Other than that, it was very exciting, you know, to go to San Francisco for a vacation. And then I was thinking of the hospital of the Good Samaritan in Los Angeles, which was an Episcopal hospital. And for no other reason than it was Episcopal. And I don't know why I thought that was so great. But Dr. Norman, who is my family doctor, and covered me with all kinds of excuses in high school. I mean, one time, Pat and I did school, and we were down at 6th and Pacific in San Pedro during school hours, and there's the vice principal across the street from us. He spotted both of us, you know. And I said, we've got to get an excuse. And I went to Dr. Norman's office, and I said, do I need a vaccination and something? He says, well, I'll give you one. So he did, and he wrote me a note, and I had an excuse, and Pat didn't have an excuse. Poor Pat always got caught, and I got off. But anyway, he was just a good doctor and a good friend.
Yeah.
So when he knew I wanted to go into nursing, he said, Jackie, go to LA County General Hospital. He said, you'll see more variety of cases there than you will anywhere. He says, you may work very hard. He says, but you'll learn more and you'll see more if you go there. So I applied for there. And he was true. I never worked so hard in all my life. But before that, Mom and I had gone up to San Francisco to go to the hospital there in Good Samaritan, you know, and when I was still making up my mind on that. And my mom said, I really want to tell you something. And she said, you need your birth certificate, and the name on your birth certificate is not Fickes. So that's when she told me that, you know, that I was Grace and Laurie's daughter, and Grace and Laurie didn't get married till 2 months before I was born. Mm-hmm. And Mimi was very embarrassed to have a pregnant daughter, and my mother was a teacher too, and she'd be fired from teaching. They would have fired her if they knew she was married, because at that time you got fired if you were married. And Grace tried to conceal the pregnancy by not gaining weight at all. And so they came down in probably August or September, after Grace and Laurie were married. And the reason my mother didn't want my parents to marry was because he was Finnish and she didn't want to fit in the family. And that was that. Wow. And no argument. I mean, that's just how she was. So they came down, and Deirdre and I visited the house on 743 23rd Street, where I was born, which looks better now than it did when I was born in it. And stayed there. I was born at home. And Hazel Boston, who was a practical nurse and my godmother, helped Dr. Cassidy deliver me. And my mother and grandmother stayed down until after I was baptized. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother brought the Curtis baptismal gown that all my mother and all my aunts and uncles were baptized in, that 5-foot-long lace gown, and I was baptized in that. And then they went back up to Canada, and my mom said they tried several times to tell me I was adopted, and I just couldn't grasp what they were talking about. So they gave up. So the funny thing was, when she told me, the first thing I thought of, all those times I've been bratty and they didn't have to keep me. So that was so funny. That was so funny. But anyway, so that didn't bother me. So I thought, well, that's that. And I didn't feel any differently to my parents, or I didn't feel any differently to my aunt and uncle.
I was going to say, had you had much contact with Lori and Grace?
Oh, never with Lori. Never
Okay.
with Lori. And he told Grace that he didn't want her to tell the other children about me. So I didn't have any contact with him. But with Grace, I wrote her letters when I was a little kid. In fact, I have one of them. When I first went to school and could write. And I wrote it to Dear Auntie, and I'm going to school, I can read, something like that. And I signed it Jacqueline Fickes, and on the back I drew a picture of a girl, a pig, a cat, and a boat. But we communicated, but not often when I was in high school. It wasn't until after my mother and father died down here that we communicated more. But I never referred to her as mother.
Yeah.
But when she got back to Canada, she sent me a gold locket. It said to J from L and G. I still have that with a picture of my mother and father in. But and my mother and her half sister, Dolly, that raised me, were very close. They were close when they were little girls because my mother was the older stepsister, and she helped with the younger ones. And Grace had a great attachment to my mother. She always did, and they were always dear friends. So it worked out good for my mother because she couldn't have children, so she had me. So it worked out, and I'm sure I got the better deal than my brothers and sisters. But anyway, it was just sort of a shock.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But not an unnerving one. There wasn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't change your feelings, and it doesn't change your relationships at all. So I think that's. I went steady with Ray Stewart during that period, and his mother gave me a doll. I think she really liked me because one of my middle names was Euphemia, which is a very Scottish name, and she gave me a doll that she brought with her when Ray's folks were from Scotland, from Glasgow, and the doll was 150 years old when she gave it to me, and I still have it.
I think you've shown it to me
Oh.
before.
Yeah. So we had good times in high school. During that time, in summers, the Wrigley's that owned Catalina Island gave all LAPD men free transportation on the big white steamer to Catalina. And my dad he wasn't into laying on the beach. He liked hunting and fishing and camping. And I think he envisioned himself as a cowboy. And he liked barbecuing.
Yeah.
He liked
Oh,
barbecuing.
yeah.
So my mom and I every year would go to Catalina for a week and have a good time there. And then we'd go camping up in the mountains. We'd go to up to the lakes in the Mammoth region or Yosemite region, or Mount Hebron, which is on the Oregon border. And my mother really didn't enjoy camping. She dreaded the thunderstorms in the afternoon because she was afraid of thunder and lightning, and she didn't take any pleasure of cooking over a campfire. But my dad had a Dutch oven, which I still have, that's older than me, And he would fix everything in that Dutch oven. He would bake pies in it. He just fixed everything in there. He just loved to cook. He loved the outdoors. He didn't care how rough it was. And the, you know, camping equipment then was
Pretty primitive.
pretty
Yeah.
antique, and places you camped were pretty antique. You had to ford the Merced River in Yosemite. There wasn't a bridge across it, you know.
It was real camping.
Real camping. And this one night when we were in Yosemite, and we'd been to watch the fire fall, you know, the rangers would get up on the top of that cliff and build a big fire, and then they push all the hot coals over it. It would just be a firefall of red hot coals coming down. Very pretty. But they stopped that because it wasn't an environmentally friendly thing to do. So we're heading back to where our tent was. And you really couldn't see. And you could see that there was a sign, like where that lamp was. And my dad said to my mom, "Dolly, would you get out of the car and go see what that sign says?" And she took 2 steps and disappeared from view. There was a drainage ditch. Oh. We just heard the scream, and she disappeared from view. And she came back to look at the sign yourself. And that's what my dad really loved. He loved camping. He just loved being up in the high Sierras. He'd go, in the early years he went hunting with guys some, but then he gave that up and he just liked to go up and go fishing, you know, and he taught me to shoot, because I'd go, they had to qualify every month on the police department, so he'd take me to the pistol range with him and let me shoot while he was qualified. And we went out to ride together. We could ride over the Palo Verde Hills there behind San Pedro, and to swim, you know, those things. But so he was really a very generous dad, and they were wonderful parents.
Sounds like you were really close to him.
Yeah. And he loved to barbecue, and we had these friends, Bill Sepulveda, who's a descendant from Furman Sepulveda that had the Sepulveda Rancho, which was a land grant that was like the front of San Pedro up toward the Dominguez Rancho, which was halfway to Los Angeles. And he had no sons, so that property was sold. So there's just nothing left but the name of Sepulveda, no land of their own anymore. But he had an Indian that had been the foreman of the ranch when he was young. And Bill Sepulveda was an old white-haired man when I knew him, and I have no idea how old that Indian was, Juan Ramos. But he taught my dad to pit barbecue and fix beans and salsa, you know, and he just loved my dad. And so my dad would barbecue. He'd barbecue for the detective department, or he'd barbecue for the Elks Club, or he'd barbecue for this and that. And then he had a barbecue for the governor of California at White's Point, and I think there were 2,100 there at that barbecue. Crud. So he would be exhausted by the time he was through with those beef clubs. And there'd always be some lady who would say, "Well, I'd like the beef, but I don't want garlic." And he said, "I've got this shoulder clod over here, that you'll just love. It has no garlic." And he'd slice it. It has as much garlic as you want. They wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, pretty much.
But he really enjoyed barbecuing. And so that's, I can't think of anything else.
Well, why don't we take a break for a second?
Okay.